Well, we got ourselves a bit of a treat today. Today we're looking at the HellHound RX 6700XT from PowerColor. Now, this won't be a typical review in a sense. We won't be looking at a ton of gaming benchmarks simply because the GPUs I have on hand don't offer much comparative value. Instead, we'll be looking closer to the thermal and noise performance offered by PowerColor. With that being said, let's get into it. Let's quickly go over the specs for the 6700XT. This card is supposed to be competing with the likes of the RTX 3060 Ti and 3070. The MSRP sits around $480, while the RTX 3070 MSRP is $500. But, let's be honest, that's a cruel joke if one. MSRP means nothing in early 2021. All I can say is that these cards are the comparators to one another. Anyways, moving on to the 3070, it has 8 gigs of VRAM while the 6700XT has 12. The 3070 and 3080 are good cards in their own regard. However, they have relatively low headroom in terms of VRAM, with the 3080 capping out at 10 gigabytes. The games coming out lately have been cranking out a ton of textures and detail that can eat up VRAM easily at 1440p. They're not maxed out by any means, but it's a strong point for consideration if you plan on keeping the card for a couple years. Again, I'm not here to make a ton of comparisons to other cards from Nvidia's portfolio simply because I don't have many except for the 3090, which is a much different card and a different class of card. We're here to talk about PowerColor's thermal and noise performance in general. So this is a decently sized card coming in at 305mm long, which is longer than my 3090 at almost 294mm in length. However, the 3090 is a triple slot card, whereas the HellHound is a double slot. We've got one HDMI 2.1 port and 3 DisplayPort 1.4 ports for the I/O. We've got 3 fans for cooling, which use ball bearings for rotation. There are 2 100mm fans and 1 90mm fan in the middle. Aesthetics are completely subjective, however, I think this is a nice looking card. It remains fairly subdued in the design language, with exception to the artwork on the backplate. Otherwise, this remains fairly neutral in appearance. The test bench used for today is an Intel i9-9900K with 64 gigs of Trident Z RAM at 3000 MHz on an Aorus Master Z390 motherboard from Gigabyte, all powered by the almighty Be Quiet Dark Power Pro 1200 watt power supply. Keep in mind, these recorded numbers, at least for the thermal performance, is the delta over its respective baseline. The noise floor is measured at about 3 feet from the test bench, which the test bench is an enclosed airflow case to replicate realistic sound production. And as far as the thermal performance goes, we'll be looking at the package temperature. Now let's see what the thermal and noise performance is like. At idle, the fans on the HellHound don't spin up only until the package reaches 60 degrees Celsius. Because of this, the card may seem like it's running warm at around 31.4 C over ambient since it's doing nothing. But this really goes for any card that uses a similar functionality, which a lot of cards use. You can change this, of course, with your own fan curve, but I'll take the silence at idle. My PNY XLRA RTX 3090 runs at 30.8 degrees Celsius over ambient with no fan spinning at idle. Now, running the card through a burn-in test with Firmark for 20 minutes holds a temp of 46.1 degrees Celsius over ambient and a total system noise production of 41.3 decibels, which is not much louder than the noise floor at 41.1. For a synthetic burn-in test, this is pretty decent for noise and thermal performance. We can see similar results to other synthetic GPU benchmarks with time spy and superposition. However, let's change gears to a more realistic workload like gaming. Now we're running Cyberpunk, and at 1440p with high settings, we're seeing temps at 38 degrees Celsius over ambient and 41.2 decibels in terms of noise of total system noise. These numbers are very respectable at keeping the temperature managed well, and quiet as well. The fans spin up to about 1095 RPM, but remain incredibly quiet with no coil whine or other obnoxious frequencies. This is what the noise output sounds like from roughly 3 feet from the test bench. For reference, replicating the same scenario with my 3090 has the card at 54 degrees Celsius over ambient. This card runs as cool as a cucumber in its stock configuration. Of course, I did run some performance benchmarks with a mix of synthetic and games, and to be clear, I did not conduct any rendering or encoding benchmarks. Anyways, each value on the chart is the average between 3 runs of the same scenario. Of course, the 3090 outpaces the 6700XT in every regard, and the 1080 Ti is definitely slower than the two. so it's no surprise. But these are the closest cards I have to compare. Regardless, these numbers show that the 6700 XT does land somewhere in between the 3060 Ti and 3070 general territory. I'm quite surprised how well it performed in Cyberpunk at 1440p at high settings actually. This card is marketed for 1440p gaming, and from the very few benchmarks present, it seems as though to be in that direction. Again, this review is more about the performance of the noise and thermal output of this specific HellHound 6700 XT. In game, the boost clock does in fact go up to 2500 megahertz and keeps the card at a delta of 40 degrees Celsius over ambient, which is quite impressive in my opinion, all the while keeping the noise output very silent. Might not be the most exciting card visually, but it doesn't have to be. The thermal and noise production under synthetic and game-based load is very well done. I know the PC market, and more specifically GPU market, is in turmoil, to put it lightly, but if you do have the chance and the price is right, and you've made your mind up on the 6700 XT, I would give the PowerColor HellHound card a serious consideration for a quiet and cool solution. If you want to see more videos like this one, consider subscribing. Thank you all for watching. I'll catch you in the next one.